The argument begins. A word misspoken. An action misunderstood. A need unmet. And suddenly the temperature rises. Voices escalate. Old wounds reopen. Past grievances surface like sharks smelling blood. You came to solve a problem. Now you are defending your character. You came to express a need. Now you are attacking their failure. The original issue is lost in the fog of war. And both sides, entrenched in their positions, forget why they started. Forget who they are to each other. Forget that the goal was never victory. The goal was understanding. The goal was resolution. The goal was love. This is the tragedy of conflict. Not that it happens. Conflict is inevitable. Two people, two perspectives, two sets of needs will disagree. The tragedy is how it happens. The escalation. The destruction. The transformation of a solvable problem into an irreparable wound. The Stoics studied this transformation with the precision of physicians examining a disease. They understood that conflict is not the enemy of relationship. It is the test of relationship. And like any test, it can be passed or failed. The Stoic approach is not to avoid conflict. It is to engage it with virtue, to fight fair, to argue with integrity, to disagree without destroying. The suspense begins here. Because fighting fair is not what you expect. It is not compromise. It is not accommodation. It is not the suppression of your needs to keep the peace. These are modern inventions useful perhaps in the short term, but ultimately destructive. They build resentment. They create false harmony. They solve nothing. The Stoic approach is different. It is radical honesty combined with radical self-responsibility. It is the full expression of your perspective combined with the full acknowledgement of your fallibility. It is the courage to speak your truth and the humility to hear theirs. This is fighting fair. And it is rare. The rarity is not accidental. Fighting fair requires what the Stoics called the discipline of assent. The capacity to examine your impressions before you act on them. When your partner speaks, when your colleague disagrees, when your friend disappoints, an impression forms immediately. They are attacking me. They do not care. They are wrong. This impression, if unexamined, becomes belief. The belief becomes emotion. The emotion becomes action. And the action, driven by unexamined impression, is almost always unfair. Almost always disproportionate. Almost always more destructive than the original offense. The examination interrupts this chain. Before you respond, you pause. You ask, what exactly did they say? Not what I think they meant. Not what their words implied. Not what past experience suggests. What did they actually say? This question, simple but difficult, separates event from interpretation. It reveals that much of our conflict is not with the other person. It is with our own projection, our own assumption, our own narrative. The Stoic fights fair by first fighting their own distortion, by ensuring that their response addresses reality rather than imagination. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. This applies nowhere more powerfully than in conflict. The quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your response. Thoughts of attack produce attack. Thoughts of defense produce defense. Thoughts of understanding produce understanding. The Stoic cultivates thoughts of clarity, of curiosity, of the genuine desire to comprehend before being comprehended. This cultivation is not passive. It is active. It is the deliberate choice to interpret generously before responding destructively. The generous interpretation is the Stoic secret. When your partner is late, the ungenerous interpretation is they do not respect me. The generous interpretation is something delayed them. When your colleague criticizes your work, the ungenerous interpretation is they want me to fail. The generous interpretation is they want the project to succeed. When your friend forgets your birthday, the ungenerous interpretation is they do not care. The generous interpretation is they are overwhelmed. These interpretations are not naive. They are strategic. They create the emotional conditions for fair fighting. They reduce defensiveness. They invite honesty. They preserve connection. The preservation of connection is the goal. Not victory. Not being right. Not proving the other wrong. Connection. The Stoic enters conflict knowing that the relationship is more important than the issue. That the person is more valuable than the problem. That winning the argument and losing the relationship is the definition of defeat. This knowledge shapes every word, every tone, every gesture. The Stoic speaks to be understood, not to dominate. Listens to comprehend, not to counter. Responds to heal, not to wound. Seneca described this approach with characteristic precision. He wrote that the greatest remedy for anger is delay. And anger is the great enemy of fair fighting. The emotion that transforms disagreement into destruction. The Stoic delay is not passive. It is the active creation of space. Space for examination. Space for interpretation. Space for the prefrontal cortex to engage before the amygdala hijacks the response. This delay can be seconds. It can be hours. It can be days. The duration matters less than the intention. The intention to respond with virtue rather than react with emotion. The virtue in conflict is specific. The Stoics identified 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. Each applies directly to fighting fair. Wisdom is knowing what is in your power and what is not. Knowing that their response is not in your power, that your delivery is. Courage is speaking your truth despite fear of rejection, despite fear of conflict, despite fear of being wrong. Justice is giving the other person the benefit of the doubt, is assuming good intention before bad, is treating them as you would wish to be treated. Temperance is moderating your response, is avoiding excess, is speaking enough but not too much, feeling enough but not too much, demanding enough but not too much. The application of these virtues requires practice. The Stoic does not expect perfection. They expect progress. They examine their conflicts after they occur. Where did I react rather than respond? Where did I attack rather than express? Where did I win the point and lose the connection? This examination is not self-flagellation. It is self-improvement. The recognition that each conflict is practice. Each mistake is information. Each failure is the foundation for future success. The future success is visible. The person who fights fair becomes someone who can discuss anything, who can disagree without fear, who can express needs without demand, who can hear criticism without collapse. This is the Stoic ideal in relationship, not the absence of conflict, the presence of virtue in conflict, the transformation of disagreement from threat to opportunity, from destruction to construction, from separation to deeper connection. The deeper connection emerges from the courage to be vulnerable, to express not just what the other did wrong, but what you need. Not just how they failed, but how you feel. This vulnerability is the heart of fair fighting. The willingness to expose your own fragility rather than attack their strength. To say I am hurt rather than you are cruel. To say I need rather than you failed. To say I am afraid rather than you are untrustworthy. These statements invite compassion. They create safety. They transform conflict from combat into collaboration. The collaboration requires the distinction between positions and interests. Positions are what people say they want. Interests are why they want it. The Stoic looks past the position to the interest, past the demand to the need, past the complaint to the fear. Your partner demands more attention. The interest is fear of abandonment. Your colleague insists on their approach. The interest is fear of irrelevance. Your friend criticizes your choices. The interest is fear of losing connection. When interests are visible, positions become negotiable. When needs are understood, demands become requests. When fears are shared, conflict becomes intimacy. The intimacy of shared vulnerability is the Stoic goal. Not the superficial harmony of suppressed disagreement. Not the brittle peace of unexpressed resentment. The genuine connection of two people who can disagree, express, fight, and remain together. Who can be angry without being cruel. Who can be firm without being destructive. Who can be honest without being harmful. This is fighting fair. And it is the highest achievement of Stoic practice and relationship. The achievement requires the abandonment of scorekeeping. The jealous tally of who did what. Who apologized first. Who compromised more. Who sacrificed greater. This accounting is the poison of relationship. It transforms love into transaction, generosity into debt, connection into competition. The Stoic releases this accounting. They give without expectation. They apologize without condition. They compromise without resentment. Not because they are weak, because they are strong. Because their peace does not depend on the other's response. Because their worth is not contingent on winning the exchange. The exchange of apologies is particularly delicate. The Stoic apologizes fully, without qualification, without excuse, without the subtle defense that transforms apology into self-justification. I am sorry I hurt you. Period. Not I am sorry but you provoked me. Not I am sorry but I was tired. Not I am sorry but you misunderstood. These are not apologies. They are negotiations. They demand forgiveness as payment. The Stoic apology is gift. Given freely. Without expectation of return. This is fighting fair. Taking responsibility without reservation. Acknowledging harm without mitigation. The mitigation is the great temptation. The urge to explain. To contextualize. To reduce the offense by adding circumstances. The Stoic resists this urge. They know that explanation, however valid, feels like excuse to the wounded. That the person who is hurt needs acknowledgement before understanding. That the healing of relationship requires the priority of their pain over your intention. This is not unfair to you. This is the strategic recognition that relationship is more important than justification. That connection is more valuable than being understood. The understanding comes later. After acknowledgement. After apology. After the emotional temperature has lowered. The Stoic returns to the conflict when both parties are ready. They seek to understand. To explain. To clarify. But they do so with the same virtue that governed the original conflict. With wisdom, knowing that understanding may not come. With courage, speaking their truth despite fear. With justice, giving the other the same generosity they received. With temperance, moderating their need to be right. The need to be right is the great obstacle. The ego's demand for validation. For victory. For the confirmation that we are good and they are bad. That we are right and they are wrong. This need destroys relationship. Because relationship requires the possibility of being wrong. The humility of fallibility. The recognition that our perspective is limited. Our memory is flawed. Our interpretation is biased. The Stoic enters conflict assuming their own error. Not to be self-deprecating. To be accurate. To create the space for genuine learning. For mutual correction. For the synthesis of two perspectives into something greater than either alone. The synthesis is the Stoic ideal. Not compromise. Not the mediocre middle ground that satisfies no one. But the integration of two valid perspectives into a solution that honors both. This requires creativity, patience, the willingness to suspend your position long enough to truly hear theirs, the confidence that your needs will be met without demanding that they be met your way. This is fighting fair at its highest level. The transformation of conflict from zero-sum game to collaborative creation. The creation requires the maintenance of respect. Even in anger. Even in disagreement. Even in the depths of conflict. The Stoic never insults. Never demeans. Never attacks character. They address behavior. They express feeling. They request change. But they do not violate the fundamental dignity of the other person. Because they know that dignity, once violated, is difficult to restore. That words spoken in anger become memories that linger. That the goal of conflict is not to wound but to resolve. And wounding makes resolution harder. The hardness of conflict is not avoided by the Stoic. It is embraced. They know that difficult conversations are the price of meaningful relationship. That the person who avoids conflict avoids depth. that the relationship without disagreement is the relationship without honesty. And so they seek conflict, not for its own sake, but for the growth it produces, for the intimacy it creates, for the trust it builds when survived. This is the Stoic courage in relationship, the willingness to risk connection through honesty rather than preserve it through silence. The silence of suppression is the great enemy. The decision to not express, to not disagree, to not fight. This creates the false peace that masks genuine resentment. The Stoic rejects this silence. They speak, they express, they engage, but they do so with preparation, with intention, with the full commitment to virtue. They do not speak from impulse. They speak from examination. They do not express from emotion. They express from clarity. They do not engage from anger. They engage from love. The love is the foundation. The recognition that beneath the conflict, beneath the disagreement, beneath the anger, there is connection. There is care. There is the shared humanity that makes relationship possible. The Stoic returns to this foundation in every conflict. They remind themselves. They remind the other. We are on the same side. We are fighting for us, not against each other. This reminder, spoken or silent, transforms the energy of conflict. From adversarial to collaborative. From destructive to constructive. From separation to deeper union. The union is the reward. The relationship that survives conflict is stronger than the relationship that avoids it. The trust that is tested is deeper than the trust that is assumed. The love that is expressed through difficulty is more real than the love that exists only in ease. The Stoic knows this. They fight fair not because it is easy, because it is worth it, because the relationship is worth it, because the person is worth it, because virtue, practiced in the most difficult context, produces the most lasting peace. If this resonated, subscribe. This channel exists to bridge ancient wisdom with modern practice, to build unshakable minds for unstable relationships, to help you fight fair, love deeply, and rise together. Next week, we explore the Stoic response to betrayal, how to rebuild trust when it has been broken. Rise as a Stoic.